This is the OverReaction podcast.
Dave?
Hey,
Brother.
Jeremy. Hey, good to catch up.
How you been?
I've been good. I've been busy. I've been taking an opportunity here after, maybe close to, I guess it's a little close to 32 years in the medical device industry, to take some of those skills and step away, do a couple startups, but also reach back out to the industry and see if there's some, we'll call former teammates and friends that I can help out along the way.
Yeah, cool. So you got in healthcare with Fuji, right? Is that how you got in?
Yeah. I think on the we'll call it the dreaded private sector started long ago. So I think many of us we've been through this, we'll call it generational change in healthcare. I went to college in the 80s into medical imaging. I had intents to go to medical school. Going to the Allied School of Science out at University of New Mexico. I learned regular radiography. I learned CT, nuclear medicine. And what was pretty interesting at that time was, this is early days of MRI, right? So they had a 5T magnet. Think about it, 5 Tesla, right? That was.
When was this?
So this is in the 80s. They had a 5 Tesla magnet, and the bore was only, I believe, 10.5 inches large. So it was limited to only extremities. The magnet was so strong, it actually was not in the hospital. It was up on a hill, separated from everything else, in its own shielded building. But it was the early days of MRI. And University of New Mexico.
So it was up on a hill right next to like a SETI satellite, right?
Yeah, exactly. Pretty close to it in Albuquerque. Direct link down to Roswell for alien communications, I guess, would be the best way to describe it. Yeah, telescope. Awesome. But what happened was this became, because they had the expertise in MRI, early adopters in the 80s, they actually put in one of the very first in-hospital low-field Tesla magnets. And during my time at the School of Allied Health Sciences, they installed it, and I learned to operate it, and also became, as you could sign up to be the guinea pig, right? And one of the early uses was gated heart MRI. So I would sign up for all kinds of studies at the university. Being an athlete, I was always looking to say, what's my performance? How could I get a performance edge? And it always dawned on me that science was the answer, right? Science was always the answer. What could you learn? So we did an early install of an MRI there. So that's sort of where my journey began in healthcare and imaging. Got recruited right out of college, went right to work for Kaiser Permanente out in Hawaii.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Hawaii is one of those interesting places where there's millions of people living there, but there's one University of Hawaii. There's a local school, which is Kapiolani Community College. And then there's some BYU outreach campuses. But overall, it's, higher education's not expansive in the state of Hawaii. So in addition to importing all their goods, you've got to import talent. So, like nurses and doctors and x-ray techs and lab techs and et cetera. So it was a great opportunity to get really immersed, and I worked for Kaiser for off and on 3 years out in Hawaii, and that was sort of where my first clinical side and we'll call it operational and clinical side began. Had an opportunity because Kaiser really invest in their people. They did then, they still do now. If you're on the right path, and I did their whole total quality management programs and things like that. They were kind of putting me in a position to run their imaging department at the time. So ultimately, life takes its twists and turns, and I ended up living in the greater Boston area and went to work at Mass General Hospital. So worked for some pretty recognizable names in the industry. Dr. James Thrall, who was the chair of radiology there. I mean, can't get too far down the path in radiology history and understanding a who's who without talking about Jim. So anyways, I met with Jim, and when I took the position, he asked me what was my thought on digital. And I said, I love that question because the future is digital. I mean, we were still using, terminal services for a RIS. There was no DICOM work list going to the modality consoles. We were flashing films. You remember the old patient cards, flashing film to put the name on there, right? But Mass General wanted to be on the leading edge. So they had invested in several Fujifilm computed radiography units. One was used up in the NICU, PICU, neonatal intensive care, pediatric intensive care. And the other was a really cool project that I got to work on, which was over in the breast center. And this was a super special unit. Now think about this is early 90s. This is way pre-MQSA. This was a dual energy subtraction breast imaging platform that we could detect microcalcifications and nodules at a rate never seen before on any X-ray film. It was that far advanced. Wow. So one of the things I did is I had aptitude for computers and I had aptitude for electronics, which, you can imagine that time, early 90s, not a lot of people had their hands on. Push come to shove, when Jim asked me about it, I said, yeah, I'd love to be part of this transformation here at Mass General. And they kind of put me in charge of understanding and learning those units. And then I became the person who trained all the techs how to use the unit. And I did that really, just kind of read the manuals, get into the computer, figure out what it does, how it worked. It was a lot of fun. It was very interesting stuff. And that ultimately led to Fujifilm showing up on site to quote unquote do the applications, right? We've all been in this early adopter phase where some other tech from some other hospital who used that technology now works for the vendor, and they show up and they go to show you stuff. Hit it off with the staff from Fujifilm. They said, "Wow, this guy's he's primed. He's probably equally knowledgeable on our product as we are. Would you like a job?" So, thus began that, 30 plus year career of working in the industry. Fujifilm at the time, right? We were first movers in the, conversion from film to CR, computed radiography, storage phosphor plates. So, there was a lot of discussion about, was CR the future? And here comes DR. This next wave was going to be DR. Yeah. Fundamentally, it didn't really matter what platform you went to. It was a conversion to digital. It was a conversion from digital, no more dark rooms, reduced retakes, etc. And over 2 decades, I worked my way through the Fujifilm organization from anywhere from, ultimately running all of software development for the Synapse packs, being essentially the global face for that product for 7 years, traveling the world, introducing it to new markets, becoming the person who shows up at the largest trade shows and gives a presentation of what we're doing now, the newest release, and where we're going. The as we would used to say back in the good old days, we used to say, the power of the PowerPoint. Our product could do everything possible in a PowerPoint, right? That was always funny. And we'll get to that later, because I got to tell you, the world has changed, and we're definitely in a new digital era. But that's kind of where it all began. In that time, and I think it's probably out there. It's one of the first peer review papers I did was actually the concept of dose reduction in pediatric radiography using computed radiography. So one of the advantages of digital is no retakes, virtually no retakes. As long as you're, we'll call it ballpark on the exposure, there's enough latitude in the response of the detectors that you get a good diagnostic image. And so gone were the days of, it's too light, it's too dark, kind of issues. And because we had the capability to work at different KVs and different MAs, because the digital latitude, you could shorten exposure times quite drastically for pediatrics. And, motion's always the biggest, that's the biggest killer in anything in diagnostic quality. So ended up publishing a paper. It actually went pretty well. A couple of the old, we'll call it old guard physicists, the original AAPM members and people who founded SIM, which was, if you remember, was SCAR right? Remember that? Before there was SIM, it was
Oh yeah,
actually called SCAR.
my first SCAR was in 2004.
Okay.
It was in Vancouver. Yeah, and it was, I don't know.
Vancouver. I remember SCAR. That was maybe the last time they called it SCAR.
I think they had one or two more, and then that
Yeah.
was it. It was really close to that. Yeah.
Yeah. That was a great meeting. As a matter of fact, there was a pivotal moment in that meeting where there was this whole discussion about CCD detectors versus other DR versus your traditional photo multipliers, right? And like which of these is going to be the digital technology that wins out. And I remember there being this big back and forth, and then as it turns out, there wasn't always a good trade-off on dose with some of those other DR detectors. Matter of fact, some of them increased dose over film, whereas the storage phosphors were specifically designed, and the way they captured at a wider latitude could reduce dose. So, yeah, I mean, those were the early days. I mean, we think about the early DICOM working groups. Herman Osterweg, everybody's got to know Herman, right?
Oh yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
Many of us in the industry, we all went to his schools. We went down to DC into the Georgetown area. We took his schools on HL7, DICOM 3.0. Then all the connectathons started, right? And then, I'm sure you've attended your fair share of connectathons related to HIMSS, right? So, gosh, I cannot believe the timing on this, Jeremy. They decided to come and blow off my porch the minute we started this call.
I barely hear it.
You barely hear it? Okay.
You can hear a little bit.
I'll shield my microphone. Yeah, it's unbelievable. He's like right outside my window. We'll give this 2 seconds. This is hilarious. She said, "Control all extraneous noise," and then this guy shows up in my backyard.
Well, we have when I head down, I live up close to Park City, and our office is down in the valley here in Utah. And it's just so happens almost every time that I come down in the morning, they're out there because we're in an office condo. We're not like in a big office building.
Okay.
We're close to the mouth of the canyon, so we get these office condos, and they're right outside mowing and weed whacking and blowing around. And I'm like,
I get you. So, so that's been part of that journey. And I think over those, 20 years and then getting into Synapse, everybody was, we need picture archive communication. And then it was the whole, and then ultimately, as you know, I left there, took a little bit of a hiatus from radiology world, and took an interesting position with a startup company in North Carolina. And the focus,
Monarch?
Monarch Medical.
Okay.
Yeah, they're still around. Yeah. The focus there was insulin dosing. So finally wanted to get some experience moving away from just the diagnostic and we'll call the nuts and bolts of it all, right? So the nuts and bolts and the DICOMs and we're going to go to virtual and we're going to go to cloud and all the things that, were happening at that time. So went to the treatment side. And this was an interesting approach, which was using advanced algorithms to predict the patient's next blood sugar. So we could predict the patient's next blood glucose level. And the primary use case was post-coronary artery bypass graft. So after a cabbage, they cut your sternum open and they crack you open, and then they take either your popliteal or some other artery or vein that's reusable, and they pop it in there and they bypass you and essentially give you better blood flow back to your heart. Well, one of the biggest challenges is because you got this big sternal wound and they've disrupted everything is you can't eat solid foods for several days because they don't want you swallowing, right? There's too much challenge with esophageal flow. So you're going to be on IV fluid the entire time. So you're going to get all your nutrients IV, which means dextrose. And when you're pumping people full of dextrose, your blood sugar goes up. And so you've got to also have in the other arm insulin. And that insulin is there to keep you from going hyperglycemic, which is really bad because then you get sternal wound infections. So any wound you have festers with high blood sugar and causes wound infections. And of course, too much insulin, it's over like that, right? You go to hypoglycemia, about 7 seconds, you're dead if you really hit really low hypoglycemia. Yeah. By the way, and this is still a fact, is that insulin is the deadliest drug dosed in a hospital. Still is. Yeah. So for that year, focused with a guy who was a hospitalist, but also a mathematical and algorithmic genius. So he was the guy who drove the whole concept of this. And what we did is we did a product while I was there that took the patient from being on IV insulin and got them into euglycemia in a safe manner, and then kept them there so that we could get them out of the ICU and put them in the step-down unit, and then they could go to subcutaneous insulin as they started to take them off the dextrose drip and then start eating solid foods. And the goal was to transition them smoothly down, get them to subcutaneous, and then get them obviously discharged from the hospital. So the whole model was reduce length of stay in the ICU, which is skip level parameter, avoid drug interaction problems, and then reduce readmissions. So by getting them into stable glycemic index and then getting them stable on subcutaneous and sending them home, we had a lower incidence of readmissions. So that was kind of the beginning, I would call. Now, I would say some of my AI journey began at Fujifilm, right? We were doing pattern recognition way early days, histogram analysis, using computer models. We did neural networks for pediatric imaging because of the structure and the change in the histograms were different than adult imaging. And of course, computer-aided detection for breast was, pretty commonplace while I was at Fujifilm. And we were already starting to look at, could we detect, could we use AI to detect pneumonia or mesothelioma and things like that. So Fuji was already building those sort of artificial intelligence algorithms, but kind of basic stuff, right? Just basic pattern recognition, not really heavy lifting the same way these things in AI that I learned truly were multiple parameter, right? 13 individualized parameters, different weighting factors, input and feedback loops, right? And that's the biggest thing, right? In good AI is a solid feedback loop. So took from that and came back to the industry for a number of years. Went back, spent some time with Terra Recon, so another name which has now since changed again. But while I was there, we introduced, and the thing I worked on there was their AI platform, which originally was called Envoy AI, now Symphony AI. And the goal there was to really change the way, a little bit of the nuts and bolts, but also to find the best of the best. What we realized as a 3D render company and as an app, we'll call it specific app building company, whether it was, colonoscopy or fly through the lung vessels, or whether it was, liver cancer detector or, all these nodule detectors, whatever you want to call them, some form of AI, we were never going to have the image volume and the medical staff and the pathology proofs that you need to actually make claims about your AI, right? I mean, everybody wants to say, oh, we're the best at detecting lung nodules. Oh, we're the best at, finding colon cancer. And whether that's, Siemens Singo or whatever they're doing at GE these days. And you pick one, right? The Philips IntelliSpace portal says they're the best, right? But what we realized is there was all these other companies too, right? There's about 60 or 70 companies out there building these very unique algorithms. So that journey with AI there was to accept that we had our limits in what we could do, and we could focus on the areas we could do best, which was improved rendering, improved navigation, and improved workflow for the physician. And then we started bringing in the AI from other specialty groups. So, working with AI Doc and the likes, Blackford Analysis and some of those folks who are building and developing their own algorithms, we built the platform. So we built a platform using containerization, put all those algorithms into Docker and containerized them, and then found a smoother way to integrate as an IO into the workflow, rather than relying on some of the standard objects. So yeah, that was some interesting times as well. The industry was kind of in an upheaval, and as I had mentioned earlier, the whole transition to PACS, and then all the PACS companies either built or bought a risk company, and then they either bought or built a VNA company, and so all your big five, what do you call big three to big five, right? they all have everything. They had everything soup to nuts. Now, most of them didn't build it, and it wasn't really their own same architecture. Many of them had 2 or 3 databases. Many of them were still relying on standard protocols to move data from, quote, the near storage packs to the long storage VNA, all those kind of things. And so I did spend a little time looking at decentralized packs. Like, it was decentralized. That was the big, it was one of the big things, I'd say about 5-6 years ago, right? Everybody's saying best of breed. Like, we've let the big guys all drive this down this street, but are they the right solutions? Like, why can't I buy a Mach 7 VNA and an equity viewer and something better for ultrasound and put them all together? If I'm going to use standards between my 3 GE products, why can't I use 3 standards between 3 different products and give me the best solution? Ultimately, I think the market just wasn't ready for that because there was such big adoption.
It's getting more ready, though.
Is it? I think it is. We're coming back around, right?
I think you are. Yeah.
You
guys are a little early.
Yeah.
But I think you've seen that emerge.
And so, that was an interesting part of the journey. I wouldn't say it's the wrong approach. Maybe you're right. Maybe it was just the right approach at the wrong time, which happens a lot. I mean, you've seen it through the decades. I mean, perfect example. I'm at Mass General. We're doing full field digital mammography. We're finding microcalcifications. We're looking at in situ cancers, ductal carcinomas. We're finding masses that were missed for 3 years on film radiography on the patient's first visit to digital. And this is the early 90s. They pass MQSA. What happens? Cease and desist. We had to pull our products from the market. Something before its time. It's an odd story to understand, but we had actually deployed over 50 digital mammography units across the United States. And we were selling Fujifilm at the time. We had a product specifically designed for digital mammography that was verified, vetted, and in full use pretty much in the rest of the world. And we brought it to the US and started marketing it and effectively got a cease and desist from the FDA once the Mammography Quality Standards Act of Congress was passed. And it's because there was no provision in MQSA for digital mammography. The entirety of the Mammography Quality Standards Act was around the quality of the facility and the quality of the film output. So they wrote in parameters like you had to take a film and you had to buy this ACR Phantom. You're familiar with the little square block, the ACR Phantom, and then you'd bring it into the room and you'd shoot it at 27 kV at 40 mass, and you see how many microcalcifications, how many clusters, right? The little 5-star clusters. And they would go out and your physicist would measure. He'd measure the H&D curve of the film. Is there enough contrast in the film? Measuring the H&D curve. And then he'd say, okay, I can count 3 clusters and I can count 5 masses. So your score combined, you pass. That was for film. We could throw that Phantom on there on our digital system, take one image, and we could get a perfect score every time. Like we could see as a matter of fact, we could even see manufacturing defects in the ACR Phantom. We could identify the Phantoms by their defects and know what serial number Phantom we were looking at by the reliability of our imaging to identify the defects in the manufacturing of the Phantom. It was that good. And then cut off. Crazy stuff, right?
That's crazy.
Technology before its time, Jeremy.
Yeah. So Terra Recon, and then InfoBionic.
Yeah. So
go to InfoBionic really quickly. And let's get to the stuff you're doing.
Yes, that's the fun stuff. I'm doing some fun stuff and
like a career polymath.
Career polymath. Yeah. So Terra Recon went well. We were in the process. We launched that platform, as you know. We dabbled a little bit in 3D printing and holographic imaging, which was also a really cool application. Partnered up with Mayo Clinic and they've got the 2 largest 3D printing labs for medicine in the United States. And they do these really cool things where for surgical prep, they actually print 3D models of the body parts before they're going to go into surgery. And like these tiny little pediatric hearts, they print, and they print them out of these malleable structures, little rubberized plastic structures. So like a little baby heart in your hand with the dual outlet syndrome. And they're like, okay, so they take everybody in, they go, okay, it's a dual outlet. Here's how we're going to approach it. Or, a VSD, ventral septal defect. They would sew it up. They'd hold the little thing in their hand and they're like, okay, it's going to we need the Vicryl 3.0 or whatever. It's super cool stuff. Terra Recon, going through a transition, ended up being acquired, as you know. A little bit of change in direction. We were building a couple of products, and had an opportunity to go back and work with one of my career friends, which, as you know, keeping tight, and keeping a reputation and friendly with everybody in the industry. That's one of the things I'll pride myself on. I can reach back to people I worked with 30 years ago, and they'll say, hey, it's Dave. Let's go work with Dave. So went to work with a buddy, Stuart Long, who's been, another guy with a crazy career
Great
path.
guy.
Stuart. He, Fujifilm, Philips.
Don't tell him. Although this will go
Amicus, right? We worked at Monarch together. We were over at Monarch together. And so we went into the diagnostic space for ECG, remote ECG, and that was InfoBionic. So wearable cardiac monitor device with a built-in cell phone, sends via over 4G to the cloud real time, we'll call real time or near real time, could be as short as 30-second snippets, but traditional monitoring was 3-minute snippets. And we'd send 3 minutes at a time, and the AI algorithms were tuned for interrogating 3 minutes of ECG, and it would flag dangerous arrhythmias. And then it would also auto-generate a daily report like AFib burdens and PVCs and PACs and things of that nature. That product had a cloud-based AI, so we had multiple scalable servers in the cloud, on demand, microservices, the whole deal. Truly using cloud technology and at its best, and working to do early diagnosis. Now, the amazing thing about the product was we were actually saving lives real time with the product, but we couldn't market it that way. So, you had another one of those kind of strange FDA stories, right? Like, you can't say that it's a life-saving device. What we had to say was, it's an adjunct diagnostic device for interpreting ECG. Within 2 weeks of us deploying at Mayo Clinic, we got a call back from Mayo Clinic, the head of the electrophysiology lab there, and said, "This is amazing. We just had a wife call us because her husband didn't answer her cell phone, and at the same time, the tech was calling us to tell us that the patient was having a major event, and they dispatched directly to this guy's farm where he was driving a combine, and the ambulance arrived in time to save him." And
wow.
It's just one of the many stories where someone was wearing the device, and ultimately, because we were real time and because of the accuracy of it and the high level of technologists monitoring it, we're able to impact and save lives. And another not really anecdotal story, but true life story is visited home to see my father and my mother for my mother's 80th birthday. And we had arrived home with all the family to, visit family like you do, right? Everybody shows up. And my dad was complaining about being fatigued and having some chest pain, maybe a little bit of chest pain. And everybody's like, well, is it stress related? Are you kind of worried about mom? Are you worried about everybody being in town? And he just said, just something's off, and plus I'm having some problems swallowing. So I was there a couple of days and I said, Dad, you got to go to the doctor. Like, I don't know why you haven't been to the doctor for this. So I sent him into the doctor, and the doctor, they went to the emergency room, and he said, well, my EKG was normal, but they're not sure. So they want to keep me overnight, and they want to do a stress test in the morning. So they're going to do a stress echo in the morning. I said, okay, well, that'll be good.
Yeah.
It was inconclusive, right? The stress echo was inconclusive. So they sent him home with a GI consult. And they said, well, there's nothing wrong with your heart. You must have some GI issues. And I said, explain to me again the symptoms you're having. And he said, well, this is what's going on. This is what's going on. I said, you know what? I'm going to send you a Momi. That's the InfoBionic device, the Momi. I FedExed him a Momi overnight, called up the head of EP at Mayo Clinic and said, my father's going to be on this device. His physician discharged him. He's got a consult to follow up with cardiology next week and to follow up with, a GI doctor. They think he's got a, GI. I'm like, 6 hours later, I get a call from Mayo Clinic. You need to get your father to the hospital right away. I said, really? Yes. I'll send you the tracings right now. So everybody's familiar with the term widowmaker. That's what my dad had. He had a near complete blockage. He got to the hospital, showed them the tracings, and they're like, where did this come from? We didn't order this. Now, I said, well, good thing I had good secondary advice and was able to get a prescription for it.
Number one, who cares? Number two, shut up and just get working on. We can talk about that later.
Well, so there's that, but the other piece was fundamentally they're like, we wish we had this technology.
Oh, well, yeah.
So there's a second side of that. So it turns out he ends up being admitted to the hospital, and what do? They put in a stent, and he had already actually, unfortunately, when you catch it that late, there's already heart damage done.
Yeah.
So he's never fully recovered. But, so I think when I think about a career journey and how did I end up at InfoBionic, right? Of all the things I did in imaging and radiology and dosing insulin, all that. And I ended up there at the time I was supposed to be there because it gave me this knowledge and the access to the technology. So I'll be forever grateful that I've been able to work in the medical industry and learn and do, some of the amazing things that I've been a part of, bringing innovations to medical imaging, bringing innovations to diagnoses. But the run at InfoBionic just kept going. So, this is a challenging time, or has been a challenging time for startups. I moved there with, big picture ideas about where we're going to go in the 2018. And then this little thing called COVID happened.
Yep.
We nearly shuttered. I mean, there's a lot of small medical devices, a lot of small companies almost shuttered because, your sales reps couldn't go into hospitals or doctors' offices. They were all closed. Nobody was paying their bills. It was crazy. But we weathered that. The reason we weathered it is we partnered with Mayo Clinic, who I got to tell you, it was the third time I had actually worked with them at a level of becoming a partner and a collaborator. First with Fujifilm on digital X-ray, second with 3D printing with TerraRecon, and then the third time with the ECG. And right now, Mayo Clinic uses the InfoBionic Momi system-wide. It's their number one device of choice. And they've launched Mayo Collaborative Services, which is the largest, third largest independent laboratory in the United States behind Quest and LabCorp. So they're using us, they're picking up, and now Mayo is monitoring patients from various other health systems. For example, WellStar down in Atlanta, they outsource all their remote ECG to Mayo Clinic, and Mayo Clinic is using our device to monitor the WellStar patients. So, really good success story. But, it's been a long journey, and I'm not getting any younger, Jeremy. And like you, I enjoy a good bicycle ride, and I need to find time for that. So for a short period of time here, and up through the end of last year, I started thinking about what did I want to do next. Because there's always the what do you want to do next? Yeah. What interests you? So I got a couple things going. One was making some investment in some local businesses here in the Jacksonville area that had an interest to me. And one is a very, very cool production company that focuses, production. Used to think about production, shooting videos and making commercials and things like that.
Yeah.
But there's some high tech components to this that are really fun. And the high tech components being, what kind of cameras you're using, what kind of technology there.
Tell me there's drones involved.
There are drones involved.
Yes.
Matter of fact, my partner in one of the businesses, Brian Murray, long ago, before there was a commercial drone industry for filming, they custom built a drone with Kenny Chesney's tour manager in Kenny Chesney's garage, and mounted a studio camera to it. And they went on tour with him. And so one of the earliest tours ever filmed by drone, flying into the stadiums and around, was the Kenny Chesney concerts. And that was done on Dynacam technology.
It can only be done with a country singer, because no other musician is going to be a good old boy with the garage and tools.
Right. I mean, that's the crazy part. He's like, y'all want to do what? That sounds fun. So,
boys. That's
so
awesome.
you know, the most recent iterations of what we're doing in that company is, you know, we have a stabilization platform that's they call 6-axis. So just like in radiology imaging, where motion is your enemy, just like in MRI is CT, right? Any kind of imaging, motion is your enemy, right? So we specialize in stabilization.
GoPro.
GoPro.
So I have a GoPro. I do it on the chin now. You see it on the chest. I want to get it up under
the helmet.
It's like a Hero 12, and that's all they've been doing for 15 years. Is how do you keep it so when I'm railing a corner, it can't do this, or the person watching is just like this. I'm going to get sick. So it has to keep, even though I'm railing over 35 miles an hour, turning over in a berm, it has to maintain it.
Yeah.
Right? So.
And that's what these stabilization systems do. So we have a couple levels of them. The biggest we'll call the bad mamma jammas are these 6-axis stabilization. So all 6 axes, so forward, backwards, up, down, left, right, total control. They have vibration control, as well as 6 gyroscopes. So there's a gyroscope that establishes 6 gyroscopes and 8 micromotors. So the gyroscopes in a feedback loop to the motors keep everything stable. We were down at Fort Bragg for the Army 250. We videoed a bunch of really cool stuff there.
Wow.
We mounted it to a Black Hawk helicopter and flew. We're currently we just did a shoot down in the Gulf of America. We just did a shoot for the Navy where we mounted to a ship mount. And shot distance to another ship in a couple of foot seas, and the images are just as stable and clear and solid as you're ever going to see. Currently getting ready to deploy for additional shoots. You know, this is a big year for America, right? We got next year is the 250th. However they say that, the quintessentia. I forget how you do 250 and
quincentennial.
Quinticentennial, something like that. So this summer was Army 250 celebration. A lot of people, you know, history is on your side. We formed an army before we formed a country.
Love it.
Right?
Who says you can't put the cart before the horse? That's fantastic.
Anyhow, so we're currently doing some work with Navy and Marines 250. So we've got the Navy birthday coming up at the end of October. The Marines birthday coming up, I believe it's November 11th. Some Marine's going to come on and tell me which day it is for sure. But
tell me you're going out to 29 Palms.
So it's really, really sad. I've been there, but we had it on our list.
I lived close to there back in 1990. 1990.
Yeah. So you know what's interesting is, you know, so go down this path a little bit is the reason that I really got interested in this is we've signed a partnership with Canon. So, you know, I'm very familiar with Canon, a Japanese company. They did some really interesting.
They're a customer of ours, so we're very pro Canon.
Yeah, great company, great people. Awesome. I got to tell you, same with Fujifilm. I mean, great company, great people, a great philosophy, great products. Canon has some really unique technology that we're working with them, and this is a low light system that's different than any other infrared IR camera on the market. So just like with computed radiography, where we were capturing invisible X-rays and capturing them in a substrate, you know, using the K-shell electrons and displacement on storage phosphors, they've developed this thing called a single photon avalanche detector. Now, there's some other companies out there that are starting to come to market with this, but they have the very largest size, which means that I can put on a 100 millimeter lens and zoom 500 yards away and take a full color picture of you, Jeremy, in near darkness.
Wow.
It's really amazing technology. So when we met with Canon and they understood my imaging background and my interest in imaging, that was one of the things that kind of triggered our conversation and our relationship. Matter of fact, I'm going to spin this around real quick for you because this is just fun. I've got one of those cameras right there. It's called an MS500. And that is my work desk where I have several of these NVIDIA GPU boxes that are necessary for AI. So we're doing some amazing.
How did you get those? I hear talking to the hyperscalers, they all say it's almost impossible to get. They're willing to pay triple, quadruple.
Well, this is having a great partner like Canon helps. We use a company called Aver Media, AVER Media. And this is the Orin Jetson box. So a lot of the people probably are familiar with that, the Orin Jetson box. So that's the box we use with a very specific high-tech SDI in and SDI out. But that's the other secret sauce to what we're doing with Canon is their AI software. And we can look through fog, for example. You can look through haze. We have image stabilization. That's in addition to the gimbals that we use to stabilize the image at long distance. Wish I had the lens mounted. The lens is probably 18 inches long and reflective lens. It's really amazing what you can do with these. But where we're going with this, we're shooting, we'll call entertainment, today, mostly entertainment with Dynacam team. And that's kind of was the entrance. But what we're doing with Canon and with the stabilization system is there's some great industrial use cases as well as homeland security, special forces use cases, et cetera, right? So being able to see what's coming over the horizon as it comes over the horizon from a ship. So we're looking in discussion with U.S. Navy, Canadian Maritime, about mounting these mast height on a ship. And at mast height, you can see so far over the horizon with these lenses and in near darkness. The last thing we want is some small vessel, undetected, loaded with explosives to get up near a U.S. Navy vessel and explode it. We know the outcome of that.
Or in the Gulf of Hormuz or the Horn of Africa.
Exactly. Or the Suez Canal or the Panama Canal. You pick it. These are all vulnerable points, and our ports as well. I mean, when you look at ports of entry, look at what happens here in Jacksonville. How many container ships come in and out of here? Just being able to ensure the security at night.
What about at speaking events? So the thing I haven't understood is these big outdoor events.
Okay.
Why aren't drones and other things used to be pointed directly at areas that anyone who should be involved in security, FBI, et cetera, would know would be vulnerable points? I don't,
Jeremy.
understand.
Yeah. Now we could take a pivot because you're right. So while I'm investigating use cases for our technology and also looking at these use cases in drones, for example, there's an untapped, unrecognized market. Exactly what you said. There is no reason that you shouldn't be able to, as head of security at a football game, university campus, hosting a speaker, politician coming to an event, be able to launch a couple of drones and fly a pattern and check every rooftop.
Yes.
Look for any signs of disturbance or things that are just out of the norm. It is almost like you would say, it's like it should be table stakes at this point, right?
And using AI to look,
and then using AI. So
right?
Perfect example. So perfect example of AI use. So you've got a venue, you fly the drone in a pattern using HD cameras, and you establish a baseline. Day of event, you fly that same pattern, and what do? You do a pattern overlay, and you say, what has changed? What is different?
Bingo.
Why is that van parked there that wasn't parked there? I got to tell
Why
you,
is there a shadow up there in the corner that wasn't
exactly.
before?
What is this black box on the corner of the roof that wasn't there?
Bingo.
Right? These are simple solutions using simple technology that we have. So these are the kind of things that, you know, we become interested in use cases for the technology. And I think they're all applicable, but you know, it all comes back down to basic image technology, image processing, pattern recognition, computer-aided vision, right? Computer visions, very simple stuff. I'm sure you talked about ripping down a hill and mountain biking. If you had the right video from the rider, you know, who's doing a downhill course, and you could watch that video, and you could help establish, as many pro athletes do, what's your timing, what's your rhythm gonna be, right? It's like you watch these crazy guys that race cars in rally racing, right?
Oh my gosh!
And the guy's reading off the sheet, 1.2 to a 90 degree to a 40 to an uphill to an 80 to a 40, and they're going 160 miles an hour on a dirt lane and throwing the full power brake and sliding around a cliff where if they go off the edge, they're dead.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. You know what they do? They drive that in slow. They drive that and video it in slow motion. Then they 4x the playback speed, so they get the visual recognition of the cues. Like, that's the tree, I want to pull the handbrake. Here's where I want to counter steer. The technology all exists.
It's the same thing in mountain biking. The guys will ride the course, they pre-ride it.
Yep.
And then they pull it up on high def, and they will watch and watch and watch and watch. And of course, they'll lap it because you got to get. There's no substitute for dirt on the tire, but it's that muscle memory and mental memory, so that it's so ingrained when they come up on it, they don't have to think.
You come over that ridge, and you already know you want to be on the right hand side of that line.
If I go on the left side, there's a big root, and I'm going to wash out. And go
well, you know, the problem I have, Jeremy, is I could watch that video all day long. But I'm one of those, I'm a road biker. So what happens is I come over the ridge and I look at that route going, don't hit the route. And you know what happens. You go where you look.
Yeah, there's a saying, it's the same thing when, you know, playing basketball. You never think don't miss the free throw. Like if you hear don't miss the free throw, etc., you have to just go up and do it. It has to be automatic. So same thing. When you're mountain biking, if someone's like, don't go this way. Okay, you need to be quiet. Tell me what to do. I need that in my brain.
Right.
Like, go straight, not look at the root or the tree, because to your point, that's exactly where you'll go.
Yeah, I've talked to some, and a good transition point here. I've talked to some pro level mountain bike and cyclocross racers, guys who, you know, who names you may recognize. They're mostly Northeast guys. They race in the Masters levels. A guy named Kevin Hines. So, and Mark McCormick, you know, Mark McCormick was a U.S. Open road race champion and multi-time cyclocross champion. Same with Kevin Hines. But Kevin and I used to describe, so he was a former motocross AMA Supercross champion. And what he used to describe was when he got on his mountain bike on a mountain bike course, he said it was awesome because it was like slow motion. So he would be going through a course, and he would come to a corner, and he like had all day to make a decision, or like picking a line through a rock garden, all the baby heads. He's like he had all day to make the decision, because he's usually going 90 miles an hour on a 450cc bike, you know, ripping through there. So
some of the best downhill mountain bikers. So those guys that are going down, they got the full squish mountain bike, 200 mil in the front, 210 mil in the back. Yeah. Most of the best guys have a background in moto.
Yeah. Yeah. It's actually, so so what else am I doing? I'm actually just about to publish a book on a theory of time perception. So I'm coming to the end of reviewing all my sources. I got about 90 scientific sources I've used for my theory, and documents, you know, published documents I've read, books I've read. And my theory is, actually the name of the book is called The Time Within, and it actually addresses that we all experience time at different rates. It's not a new theory. People have always understood that they call that chronoception. Chronoception is how we each individually perceive clock time, or chronoception. Now, I'll give you the foundation of the theory. The foundation of the theory is that there's a lot of things that are negatively impacted by our perception of time or how our brain stores time. And very specific examples is PTSD, drug and alcohol abuse, ADHD, and depression. And in each case, there's temporal disruption in the way those people store those time segments or those timed events, or how they in a day experience time is different than the way, say, you or I may experience time. So people with depression, the way they actually store time memories or experience time in their brain is different than you or I. And so we've always in the past thought of these as symptoms. We thought temporal disruption was a symptom of depression or a symptom of PTSD. But my theory takes a reverse approach, and this is what you have to do in science and medicine, is I'm looking back on it and saying, actually, it could be a cause. It could be a cause. The way that they're wired, the way their brain, their basal ganglia and other portions where you store and how you form memories and perceive time, what if it turns out that we find a way to manipulate or can help you train your brain to store and experience time differently? And through interviewing and training techniques, we could help people who have depression or ADHD by doing some temporal disruption training and actually change the way they store their memories and experience time and pull them out of depressive modes or pull them out of like a PTSD spiral.
Super cool. So how do like a normal, and you're about the first person that ever called me normal or classified me as normal.
Yeah. Cool. Nobody's normal.
But, well, yeah. I'm like young Frankenstein. I'm Abby normal. So let's say someone operating or experiences time in what would be considered normal parameters.
Right.
What is someone who suffers from depression or ADHD or PTSD? What is the difference in how they store memory?
So there is a chemical and a physical aspect about how you're storing your memories, right? So you got all your synapses, right? Funny that word comes back, right? Synapse means intelligent connection, right? And you have a thing called an axon and you have a thing called a dendrite. And it's the actually electrical pulses that go between them that actually trigger what's going on in your brain. So that has to do with how you actually store information, right? It also has to do with like how quickly you can react to something or your emotions. But there is some chemical changes. And of course, you can also research this, a lot of papers on this. Some people take THC products. They go out to California and buy some gummy bears. And while they've eaten gummy bears, they think the day slows down.
Yeah.
And so there can be, and this is part of why people become chemically dependent. People who become chemically dependent on certain things is it actually alters the way in the chemistry you're storing these memories and how well and how many synapses are firing to store a specific memory. You can have temporal disruption using chemical. You can have temporal disruption using focused techniques. For example, you think about people who go into these deep trances, right? Go into a deep trance, go into a meditative state. Not only do they slow down their heart rate, they're actually slowing down their perception of time in their brain. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah. So would that be for because there's some people that are really resilient where bad things happen to them, they move on. It seems like for them, it's quick.
Yes.
And for people that are depression, it seems like it is forever. They live in that, those bad times, and it just goes on and on. It seems time slows down dramatically.
It does, and it's interesting. The storage component is actually opposite. When time slows down, think about this. You're actually storing right now, frame by frame by frame. Your memories are not a contiguous, smooth 4K video. Each is a discrete individual snapshot in time of your memory. If you start compressing and do a whole bunch of those crammed together, you re-experience them. Your experience takes longer. So it's actually people who store stuff at a higher frame rate are actually experiencing longer times. And this is what happens, and it's almost confirmed through other research, and it's part of why.
So are you saying we need to be mental tortoises, not mental hares?
Something. But PTSD is a perfect example of that. if you take, and there's been case studies where 2 soldiers in the same Humvee get blown up by an IED. They come back and you interview them, and one guy spends years suffering with PTSD. He relives that moment when that IED went off. From the time the IED went off to the time that he got medevac, to the time he got to Germany, to the time he got home, he relives that in near real time. And so it literally takes his slowly re-feeling that pain, re-feeling that scary that he had when he was on the helicopter, wondering if he was going to make it. They relive it almost because they've stored it in such compressed time that when they go and remember it or relive it in their brain, it gets stretched out and they relive it at real time. And so, like you said, some people, bad thing happens, they're like, bad shit happens. And they relive it for the moment, that 10 seconds, and then they move on. And you can actually, my theory and what I'm going to hopefully publish, and I actually got some research planned for it down here in Florida at a big facility down near Fort Lauderdale. They've got 5 treatment centers. So we'll have, all under true IRB. This is not like Dave making stuff up. This is a true scientific theory. It's been vetted. I've got some peer review going on currently. We're going to be doing actual IRBs and creating a chronoceptive self-awareness tool. So I'm creating a little app that'll help you determine what your chronoceptive awareness
I mean, it's going to be amazing, because if this works, and it sounds like the whole premise is really sound, and hopefully it works.
Yeah.
It'll help people move on and progress.
That's what we want.
Right?
That's all I really want. I mean, every family member, I might not every family member, because I got a lot of crazy family members, but every family, and I've got family members, is what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah.
You've got pockets where it's depression or substance abuse or somebody with a PTSD moment from some effect in their life. And when you see this negative impact on these people, and then you see what it does to them, their ability to interact in society, their ability to hold down a job, their ability to just be a good citizen. And you say, there's got to be something we can do outside of pumping them full of pharmaceuticals, or
which rarely works long term at all.
It never works long term.
Doesn't.
It just does. And this is why, because the human body is the most amazing thing on the planet. And you are so adaptive that your body, you start taking this to a point, and then suddenly your body finds a way to work around it, right? It finds a different path. So it's something that I'm doing. So, we talk about next steps. I mean, I love imaging, and I love what we're doing with the camera technology and the AI technology, and working with the government and the, Department of Defense and things. That's all a lot of fun. But at the same time, this is something I've been passionate about for a long time. But until I stopped having a day job that I had to pay attention, 60 hours a week, I couldn't get there. So again, the manuscript is almost complete. I've got a scientific editor doing it right, reading it right now, making sure all my sources are valid and referenceable. I have a few folks I need to reach out to for release of information who are included in the manuscript. But I'm hoping to at least have the first round of perhaps it being accepted to a journal by the end of the year. I've written it as both a take it off the shelf book, as well as a guidance scientific manual that will then result in some research. And if all goes well, I'll publish a follow-up manuscript about the results of the research and the techniques that we tried to get people to change the way we treat people for these specific disorders.
That's amazing, man. Well, my producer is going to hit the kill switch.
In
50 seconds.
But hey, I got to tell you, Jeremy, it has been great catching up. Yeah, we could go on.
I want to do this again. When you get closer to it, especially when you write your first book, got to have you on. I want to read it, go through it. We'll talk about it again. Send me. Yeah. I'm going to put your LinkedIn profile in the show notes. Any of your other companies or things that you have,
absolutely,
you want us to actually put in the show notes as well, so when people watch the podcast, they can see it. Send it to me, and we'll make sure it's there. But my friend, this has been super fascinating, so interesting, especially this last part, just unreal. I really thanks so much for coming on, man.